Here is the full English translation of the text. A prophecy attributed to a woman who died 30 years ago says that in November 2026 an enormous extraterrestrial ship will appear in Earth's atmosphere. And that isn't the only prediction that has drawn attention again this year. There is an ancient text that seems to point to a final pope. A Japanese artist predicted a disaster that made people cancel trips to Japan. And an indigenous tradition speaks of a star that would announce the end of an era. But where did all these predictions come from? And why are so many of them being linked precisely to 2026? It's good that we're together so you can find out all of this.
Number 1. Baba Vanga.
For decades, people from different countries traveled to a small house in Bulgaria to speak with a blind woman named Vangelia Gushtarova. She is known worldwide as Baba Vanga. According to those who stood before her, Baba Vanga didn't speak like someone simply guessing the future. According to these accounts, she described images, spoke names, and gave warnings that seemed to come from an invisible place. She died in 1996, but her words were preserved by relatives who claimed to have heard her. The lists attributed to Baba Vanga for 2026 contain 5 main warnings: a military escalation capable of involving several powers, a global economic crisis, more destructive natural phenomena, the growth of an artificial intelligence that is hard to control, and a possible encounter with extraterrestrial life. Several publications claim that Baba Vanga mentioned the arrival of an enormous spacecraft in November 2026. Some versions say it would appear in Earth's atmosphere during a sporting event. Others claim it would not be an invasion, but a first visible contact between humanity and a non-human intelligence. As for a new war, the predictions mention a confrontation in Europe, a fight for strategic territories in Asia, and a rupture between great powers. In a world where every week there are threats, attacks, and new military alliances, there is always some conflict that fits this description. The economic warning works in a similar way. It speaks of a financial crisis caused by the collapse of traditional systems, by growing debt, and by loss of confidence in currencies. However, it doesn't specify which country will start the problem or how it will begin. A market crash, a banking crisis, or a trade escalation are enough to trigger the prophecy. But the most modern prediction is related to artificial intelligence. Baba Vanga is credited with the vision of machines capable of controlling human decisions. But don't worry, she doesn't describe robots walking among us. She speaks of systems that manage information, select what we see, and make decisions that once belonged exclusively to people.
Number 2. Parravicini.
Benjamin Solari Parravicini was an Argentine artist who became famous during the 1930s. Legend has it that he began waking up with phrases and drawings he didn't remember planning. He would pick up a pencil and quickly sketch a figure and then write a few short words beneath it. He called these works premonitory psychographs. According to him, an entity identified as Friar José de Aragao was calling his attention. Between 1936 and 1972, he produced more than 1,000 drawings, and some of them seem strangely modern when viewed today. In 1938, for example, one of his psychographs was later interpreted by followers as a reference to television decades before it became part of everyday life. In another drawing, he described an artificial maternity in which humans would be cultivated without direct contact. Decades later, in vitro fertilization would arrive. He also drew a dog and wrote that it would be the first living being to fly into space. In 1957, indeed, the Soviet Union sent the dog Laika aboard the spacecraft Sputnik 2. In 1971, Parravicini wrote about a divided Argentina and mentioned a figure who became known as the Gray Man. The popular interpretation associates this image with a profound political transformation and even the possibility of violence in the streets. He didn't explain what it was, what its name would be, or in what year it would appear. The drawing shows a simple figure with a military uniform, crown, or symbols of power. In 2025, this psychograph stopped circulating only among curious people and reached the Argentine political environment. People close to Javier Milei's government began to link the image of the Gray Man to the changes they said they were promoting. And this is where the prediction enters 2026. Argentina continues going through a political and economic transformation, and some followers of Parravicini began looking in the present for the character he supposedly described decades ago. But so far there is no objective evidence that the Gray Man is a specific person, and perhaps it is precisely this vagueness that keeps the prophecy alive. Number 3. Saint Malachi and the Last Pope. The death of Pope Francis and the election of Leo XIV reignited a prophecy that had been waiting for its next step for years. The document is known as the Prophecy of the Popes or the Prophecy of Saint Malachi. It contains 112 short phrases written in Latin. Each one would describe one of the pontiffs who would govern the Catholic Church from the 11th century to the end of times. The text was attributed to Malachi, an Irish archbishop who traveled to Rome around 1139. According to tradition, he would have seen the future popes and recorded their characteristics symbolically. But there is a detail that completely changes this story. There is no evidence that the document existed in the 11th century. The prophecy was only published in 1595, more than 4 centuries after Malachi's death. And that is precisely why many historians consider the text a forgery produced in the 16th century. Even so, the mottos attributed to the popes prior to publication seem, in several cases, surprisingly specific. For example, John Paul I was associated with the phrase of the sun's labor, since he was born and died on a day with an eclipse. Benedict XVI was associated with glory of the olive, because the olive branch appears in Benedictine symbols and represents peace. The traditional interpretation places Benedict XVI among the last popes on the list. After him would come the most frightening figure of all, Peter the Roman. The final motto states that during an extreme persecution against the Church, Peter the Roman will govern and lead his flock through many tribulations. After that, Rome, the city of 7 hills, would be destroyed, and the final judgment would occur. When Francis was elected in 2013, many immediately identified him as Peter the Roman, but his baptismal name was Jorge Mario Bergoglio, not Peter. He also wasn't born in Rome. However, his parents were Italian, and his position made him a successor of Saint Peter. For followers of the prophecy, that was enough, although to many it seems forced. Francis died without Rome being destroyed. Then Leo XIV emerged, and this created a problem for those who expected Francis to be the last pope on the list. The count seemed to have gone past its endpoint. The defenders of the prophecy, however, found other ways to reorganize the count. Some interpretations include antipopes, others exclude certain pontiffs, and there are those who argue that there could still be popes between the previous motto and Peter the Roman. One interpretation published before Leo XIV election even suggested there would still be 2 popes after Francis. If that interpretation is correct, Leo XIV would not be the last pontiff, but the second to last. And the mystery has grown even stronger, because the new pope took office during a period marked by international conflicts, religious divisions, and migration crises. During 2026, he has repeatedly called for dialogue and peace, while military threats increase. For those who watch the prophecy, the shepherd would already be feeding his flock in a time of tribulation. For skeptics, however, this kind of correspondence can be found in practically any period of crisis. Number 4. The Hopi Prophecy and the Blue Star. Long before the emergence of modern cities, the Hopi people developed a different vision of time. According to their tradition, humanity passes through successive worlds, precursors, probably, of the multiverse concept. Each world ends when human beings break the balance with nature and forget their spiritual responsibility. The first worlds were destroyed by ice, fire, or floods. The survivors were protected and guided into a new stage. We are currently said to be living in the fourth world. A modern and widely spread version of the tradition describes a series of signs that would precede a great transformation. Among them appear images of wheels, roads, a web that would cover the earth, a darkening sea, and finally, a blue star. During the 20th century, these images began to be associated with real events. The wheels were linked to trains, the roads to great modern highways, and the darkened sea to oil spills. As for the blue star, according to the popular version, it will appear in the sky and remove its mask. Its presence will announce the end of an era and the beginning of a global purification. The most powerful part of the Hopi tradition isn't in a specific star, but in the warning about imbalance. In 2026, the fork in the road becomes visible. One part of the world will seek more clean energy, cooperation, and new ways to protect the planet. The other will accelerate exploitation, war, and competition to control technology. The blue star still hasn't appeared as the described sign. But for believers in the tradition, the real question isn't when it will appear, but whether humanity will notice the signs before it does. Number 5, Edgar Cayce and the Earth Changes. Edgar Cayce was known as the sleeping prophet. To perform a reading, he would lie down, close his eyes, and enter a sleep-like state. From there, he answered questions about illnesses, past lives, distinct civilizations, and future events. Nearly 14,000 readings were recorded in writing. Most were related to health, but some described gigantic transformations on the planet. They spoke of earthquakes, coastline changes, volcanic activity, climate shifts, and a reversal of the poles. Coastal cities would be submerged, while submerged territories would resurface. In 2026, his predictions resurface whenever a strong earthquake occurs, an ice shelf breaks off, or a storm floods a city, not because Cayce predicted these specific events for 2026, but because his general descriptions allow them to be reinterpreted in light of current events. Cayce didn't see the changes merely as punishment. For him, it was a process of transformation. Structures built on selfishness and abuse would disappear, forcing people to create a different society. Number 6, Rio Tatsuki and the manga. In 1989, Japanese artist Rio Tatsuki published a manga called The Future I Saw. The book compiled dreams she had recorded over the years in her personal diaries. The cover contained a small phrase, "Great Disaster in March 2011." And on March 11, 2011, an earthquake triggered a tsunami that struck Japan and caused the Fukushima nuclear disaster. When readers found the manga's cover, Rio Tatsuki went from retired artist to self-proclaimed prophet. Her earlier works were also linked to the deaths of Freddie Mercury and Princess Diana. Followers analyzed dates, dreams, and images in search of correspondences. But the prediction that really matters for this story came later. A new interpretation of the manga pointed to a great disaster in Japan on July 5, 2025. The date arrived, and the predicted disaster didn't happen. Except something unexpected happened before it. People really did start canceling trips to Japan. Airlines reduced or suspended flights. Agencies reported a drop in bookings, and fear of the prediction ended up affecting tourism. And perhaps this is the most frightening prophecy of all. The disaster predicted by Rio Tatsuki never happened, but the prediction managed to cause real consequences. The ocean wasn't destroyed, the city didn't disappear, but people changed their plans, companies lost passengers, and a prophecy with no scientific proof altered real-world decisions. Perhaps the greatest power of these predictions isn't in getting the future right, it's in convincing millions of people that it has already been written.